Boom. And we are live on DLive today with my boy, Dr. Bear Paul Lando, live and in effect, coming to you straight from the South Fork of the Smith River, living that off-grid life. And today's going to be fun. We're going to talk about a really fun topic that has been coming up a bunch on some of our channels. Let me go ahead and just notify our Telegram channel that we're going live. One second. And actually, let me grab my phone so I can do something on Telegram. I'll throw it over to you, Bear. And just give us a quick second. Let us know what you've been up to as we get people coming in here already. So let me mute this. How's your day going so far?
It's doing good. Busy, really busy time of year. And I still do a little consulting, even though I'm retired, and I had an overseas client that just left. And they land on my doorstep still. So things get very intense because they come in with severe problems and takes a little energy output amidst running in and out, taking care of the farm and all the other things we have going. But all's good. Beautiful day. It's cooled down here a little bit. So I might have to water only once instead of 3 times. It's been 100-degree days up here. But everything's going good. We're about 2 weeks behind planting, maybe longer. But we'll get it all done this week. And I'll be relieved when that's done because it's quite a chore. We expanded our crops this year, and next year we'll expand one more time, and then we'll be in a very serious commercial zone as far as making some of our offerings available to the world at large. Right now we make just enough grow just enough to put in some of our products, our tea lines, and this year we'll have a lot more actually with what we just planted. Next year we're going to be on par with anybody growing our prime herb out there.
Yeah.
And people won't have to do it in Asia anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I actually did a post about Jiao Gulan on Scent, which is a new platform that we're really loving. And sorry about the hair today. Just kind of woke up, ran outside, and been doing stuff nonstop.
Actually, I was going to say something. You are having a bit of a bad hair day there.
I think it's actually kind of rock star, personally. I think it's a good look.
I had mine styled this morning. I always spend quite a bit of time so I can look this way.
Yeah, well, I thought you just kind of rolled naturally that way. I thought just the being out.
Oh, yeah, you know.
I mean, for me, the rock star kind of messy hair look, it gets the ladies going. So
it's edgy,
and the fellows going.
I'll tell your wife that too.
Yeah. But no, I lost my train of thought. I was just gonna say, So I put a post out and sent about Immortality tea, and there's some like kind of snarky, funny comments about it. If because there's the whole quote about drink Immortality tea every day, live to 100, and there was some kind of snarky responses about, well, that's not immortal, But they get what we mean. It's a longevity tonic that Asian cultures have been celebrating for thousands of years. And we all know that historically, typically from modern science has shown that those communities tend to have a longer lifespan than a lot of people in the West. There are, of course, pockets in the West, like in Italy and different islands and stuff, where that longevity reigns true as well. That's a great segue, actually, today into what we're going to be talking about, which is essentially different ways to go about your diet and how that relates to longevity and your overall quality of life and your health and all that. But the Jiao Gulan that we grow and what we're building out up here in Northern California is really unique because, as you were saying, Dr. Lando, currently to get that herb, you would typically need to order it from overseas, from China or Thailand. And even the quote unquote organic Jiao Gulan you would get is typically, as we've found out through third party testing, riddled with all sorts of issues.
It is pesticide issues, even though it's organic. And by the way, that's an old Asian proverb, drink it every day and you'll live to 100. However, if you drink our tea, you will live to 100, and we will give you a full money back guarantee if you don't live to 100.
That's funny. Someone actually put in one of the comments on Scent, if I'm not immortal, do I get money back? And I'm like, well, I didn't reply to that yet, but technically, we're all immortal. So that's a pretty good guarantee we got going on. Because if you actually understand really what we are, we all are immortal. Just because our meat suit slowly perishes doesn't mean that we do.
Only if you drink our tea.
Exactly. Yeah, so I think that's a good segue, though, into today's topic, which is a heated one, considering that so many folks out there, well, it's great. It's great to see. It's great to see that people are really getting in tune with their health in respect to their diet. And we've gotten to these extremes, though. These extremes where now it's like I only eat raw food off a tree. It has to be growing on a tree have the true life spark for me to appreciate what vegan is now. We've seen that extreme too. I only eat meat and nothing else but meat. The heart still needs to be beating, kind of thing. It's just like so. Today we'll kind of go into the different sides of this and give our perspective, and also more importantly, besides my more limited perspective, your perspective from all the clinical research you've done and the clinical work you've done, and your wisdom from all your years on this planet in competitive athletics and so on.
All my years on the planet, are you suggesting that I'm old?
I'm suggesting you've got me by a few decades, but I'm not suggesting you're old by any means.
Just a few.
But yeah, where do you want to start with this?
Well, tell me what's the hoo-ha in the chat room there? What's people are getting heated? Why are they getting heated? It's just food.
Oh, no, not in the chat room here. We haven't actually had any chatter yet, but and there's not really heated. It's just people throwing in their 2 cents on their kind of dogmatic view on what is the right way to go about full vegan or full paleo. And I've kind of come in and given our 2 cents. No pun intended on the Scent channel here. But I could actually even bring up some of the discussion here in a second. Let me just find it. But
actually, I know where you're coming from with that, because for some people, a lot of people get really militant about their diet. And, some people are selling things and books and things, but then, the followers really, really get into it. It's always been a curiosity to me. And, if you're talking about food, the first thing we have to realize is that old saying, we are what we eat, really isn't true. We are what we are. And our food choices really reveal where we're at in our process, or in our evolution, if you want to think of it that way. And one thing I learned in clinic for many years is that there's no one best diet. And even aside from diet, when it came to other practical measures and modalities and treatment approaches, for instance, you could get 100 people with the same diagnosis of some particular disease, have identical symptoms, and real medicine, you'd have to treat each one of them completely different. And, we have ways to assess what those unique differences are and how to address them. The same thing with diet. When you're working with somebody, there's so much involved with our food. It's incredibly entwined with our emotional body because, the one link that we have to our survival other than, after breathing is food. And most people can't even fathom, missing lunch, and, again, it's equated with our survival. And we make a big, big thing out of it. And I truly believe that health, as well as our spiritual evolution, is dealing with all of our attachments. And food is, it's an energy source. It's compressed informational fields. And those informational fields, whether they're meat or vegan, have inherent qualities in them. So you have to ask yourself, what are your goals? What's your purpose in life at the moment? Where are you at? What are you craving on your dinner plate? That's going to, again, reveal a lot about who you are at this moment in time. And look at it that way. So when you read a book or follow a diet guru or the latest trend, you're probably really missing a lot of good experience, which is the discovery process of where you're at, where you desire to go, and how much you really understand about the life process. I've done every extreme myself. I was on the website. People can go and see. 280-pound football player with no neck and in total body consciousness beast mode, a good deal, and total gym rat and into combative arts and that kind of thing. And to the other extreme of being a raw food vegan and everything in between. So the truth is, we're always in transition, and use food as a tool to facilitate wherever you are in that transition, and also to introspect what your food choices are revealing about you.
Yeah. And I guess that journey is something we can kind of get into and giving some people some practical advice on how to go about that journey to discover. And you made a really good point about the emotional side and the emotional body. And these are things that modern diet gurus and books rarely talk about. And it dives more into the spiritual side as well. But getting more in tap with your emotional body is so crucial for your health, and how that relates to the emotions of the attachments you have with food. Obviously, in modern day society now, we see this relationship with food has been commoditized to the point where we've got the Food Network and we've got Bon Appetit magazine and all these other things that really celebrate food in a way that is obviously above and beyond health. It's a way to find enjoyment in life. And I am a quote unquote foodie in that respect. I at one time messed around with going to a culinary school, and I had a catering company and a fledgling one that we tried to get off the ground back in the day. And I've worked in restaurants, and I enjoy going out and dining out. However, there needs to be a balance between this relationship and the relationship that is naturally intended with natural law for what the point of food is. So anyways, what are some ways we can dive into, and how you work with, when you were really working in your clinical practice, how you would relate these concepts to your patients and to friends and family, so they can have a better understanding of how to really optimize this relationship with food and really live the healthiest they can in regards to diet?
Well, first off, don't put the cart before the horse. And some people that are familiar with our discussions understand that we look at things in more of a reverse order than the conventional perspective, in that we understand we're in a thought-based universe, and we do create our reality, and this can be proven out, and we'll expand more on that later. But when you're looking at things within our physicality, including food, and thinking they are the thing that will change us, versus us actually being in the control seat, which we really are, whether you believe it or not, then you're externalizing, you're giving your power to something external to you, which is never a good idea. So that's why I say, look at your food choices. That's revealing something about you. Now in a clinic, we had ways of, and still do have ways of, understanding what a person's present needs were. And sometimes very staunch vegan types would need a tonifying kind of food that was maybe in an animal byproduct, just to temporarily use as a tonic, just like a tonic herb, in order to improve their health. And then, we'd successfully transition them through that, get to the next stage where they could start lightening up their diet and achieve the next level of health. For instance, in the temples in the old country, and I get a lot of these anecdotal stories from teachers I've had in the martial arts and so forth. But real fighting monks, people that were remarkable in their ability to be robust physically and perform extraordinary physical feats, they were completely plant-based, because they were working more on their inner game. However, they had fish ponds, and if there was a situation where somebody was injured or convalescing from anything, then they would temporarily use the flesh of fish as more of a tonifying food to help rehabilitate. Then they go back to their plant base. And these days it's funny. You have the plant-based vegans that are very militant, and I actually understand that well, and I carry a similar philosophy in that I think it's very primitive to incarcerate animals and mass slaughter them, and the way we do it in the commercial world, where you go in and you get your shrink wrap meat, which is just rotting flesh, that you have no skin in the game because you're just buying it, rather than maybe hunting yourself and making peace with the animal and blessing the animal for giving you life. It's a whole different energetic experience. So if you're going to eat meat, I really think you need to give some appreciation, and for that animal that gave you its all. That is going to make it healthier for your body, and also take every measure to not support the the Auschwitz style cattle farms and that kind of thing that are pretty horrendous. Mike, there's one down Midway and Highway 5 on your way down the spine of California to reach Southern California. And, when we take that, in fact, I don't want to even take that route anymore because I can't handle the sight of that place. But I
refuse to take the 5 anymore. It's soul draining. The 101 all the way. I can't do the 5 anymore, even if it shaves off 45 minutes. It's too much.
Yeah. The last time down there, when we passed all those cattle fields, it was just heartbreaking, and everything else. And I literally hid my eyes and looked the other way while my wife was driving.
Not to mention too, the stink. You can smell it before you see it.
Yeah, it's horrible. Yeah, so we're doing things very crudely. And I personally, it's my philosophy, take it or leave it, believe that humanity as a whole will someday look back upon meat eating as like cannibalism. I mean, you're eating flesh of another mammal. Okay, that being said, I've been in there with the best of them, no judgment about meat eating. And okay, back to your question, since I've done it myself, and again, I was into that, carrying massive body weight and strength and everything in order to play the sports I used to play. But then at a certain time, it just seemed like it was time to explore other vistas. So, I made a transition into kind of, animal products, but not flesh derived, and then into, more raw foods, exclusively plant-based, and so forth, and until in present day. Sorry, that's my phone. It'll stop in a second here. Should have undid that.
Oh, it's fine. We can barely hear it.
Okay, good. So anyway, the problem is with people that want to go into a diet based on only ideology rather than respecting, and we won't even go into the spiritual aspects right now. We'll do that later. But when you are just ideology based and say, okay, I want to be a raw food vegan, and then not considering that maybe for the entirety of your life, you've been on a different diet and never gave your body time to get accustomed, or, a transition period where you develop the necessary enzymes and other factors that we require in order to efficiently break down different kinds of food stuff, cellulose-based food stuff, extract the mineral content and everything, even though I believe it's superior. If you just do it too suddenly, then it can affect your health. And, a lot of the toughest cases I ever had in my clinical days were people that were absolute food purists and, wouldn't touch certain kinds of foods and so forth. And they just weren't thriving physically. And so when we put them through a transition period where we kind of gave them the foods that they were more accustomed to, but also, if there were animal derived, then they would be, not the stuff you get in the supermarket, be organic, grass fed. We'd also, if you're using dairy, that sort of thing, raw organic, which is a whole different animal than pasteurized, eggs, free range, and so forth. And so at least you're taking a step to clean things up and also be a little kinder to animals, because those animals that we're still slaughtering and using in that fashion just to derive their byproducts like dairy and eggs, that's under more humane conditions where they're running around free, munching on grass, and it's at least the best of that world. And then gradually transit the diet so it's more plant-based until a person is comfortably there. And comfortably there, not just understanding that the chemistry has had a chance to accommodate a new way of eating, but emotionally, when you're there, that's what you'll crave. Not, you aren't eating something because you're supposed to, or because you want a virtue signal that, you're holier than the rest of us because, you eat a certain way. And then what's interesting on the paleo side, we have a lot of those casualties of the people that jumped in both feet, and an incredible amount of people that make up the paleo crowd that went paleo. Well, there's two types of paleo. There's paleo with flesh foods, and then there's paleo just meaning, you're eating plant-based stuff as they normally exist in nature rather than eating cultivars that are farmed. By the way, to a lot of vegans who buy their food from Whole Foods, and I really don't mean to step on a lot of toes here, but what I'm trying to illustrate is there's a lot of sides to this issue. But when you're buying your stuff from Whole Foods, you're still eating maybe I shouldn't say Whole Foods. Just
It's okay.
Whole
Amazon's
Foods.
not
They're
going to
the
come
worst
after.
corporate. Yeah,
Amazon's
yeah,
not going to come after us. It's okay. You can say Whole Foods, because that, unfortunately, Whole Foods has become the new mainline grocery store for people. It is better than going to like a Safeway or something, but still, it's become the new corporate standard. And I know where you're going with this. Not to interrupt, but yeah, Whole Foods.
yeah. So they're providing food en masse, even though it's allegedly organic, and we could talk about organic food. It's really not what you think it is a lot of times. So, a lot of bunny rabbits and all sorts of animals get caught up in the combines and everything else, where you're tilling that much land at a time to make those mass crops available to so many people. And in tilling, that's another can of worms, because when you till the soil, you destroy the topsoil. And in permaculture, we're all about teaching people how to go more into the trend of local small farms in every single location, where you don't till the soil, which actually destroys it, which is going to set up the next generation without anything to eat. So that's another topic. So yeah, we're harming the environment and a lot of animals in the name of eating plant-based foods a lot of times, if you're not growing it yourself or supporting your local permaculture farmer. Oh,
Yeah.
I see somebody in the back there.
Oh yeah. We've got school's out, so I've got the boys.
Ah, nice.
A little, little Groms running around. I think one just got hurt from a dog, but you good, bud?
Uh-oh.
Oh, okay. Well, I need you guys to chill. Okay. Thanks.
But you should have seen the dog, huh?
No, it's his brother. They're, being brothers.
God, the day school was out in summer, that was always the happiest day in my life. I wish in my generation they had the Steiner Method of education, where little boys are not meant to be cooped up inside memorizing abstract academic principles. And Steiner knew that and left a whole legacy of enlightened education. And I was one of those people that never should have been in school. In fact, if I was a child these days, they probably would have had me on every drug known to man just to calm me down and subdue me, Anyway, sorry.
Oh, you're good. No,
off.
they've been having a blast already with summer break. I mean, where we live, we live right next to their school, a mountain school in a tiny town up on a river in the tip of Northern California. And so they've just been running around like wild men, and hitting the river every day, and just having a blast before we head out. We're actually going to head down south to visit family into the chaos of Orange County and go to Disneyland and all that. But yeah, they're excited. They're super pumped. But brothers will be brothers, and they tend to go at it every now and then. Sounds like they're doing right now, but that's okay. Mom's at work. They're gonna figure it out themselves. But
good enough. I think we're talking about food.
Yeah. Well, I think going into the energetic aspect's really crucial, and kind of I think delving into that more, because you're going into the idea of vegans shopping in Whole Foods, and there's a certain energetic aspect to buying even like produce that's been mass farmed, even if it's quote unquote organic, versus even just growing yourself. And in some respects, while it is better than, personally, I think better than buying mass livestock-based meat, as you were saying, which is just kind of rotting flesh sitting there. But also, when you're buying a mass-produced tomato or pepper or something, that in a sense is also rotting flesh, the flesh of the tree or whatnot. So there are parallels there. And when people get on their high horse on either side, especially on the vegan side, about slaughtering animals, well, there's one thing I always point out is that when you're going to Whole Foods and buying your soy products or buying your mass market agricultural products, you know how many animals are slaughtered on a daily basis with all the mass ag going on, all the little bunnies and rodents and everything that are just ground up as they harvest those crops. And so that's the point of this, is just saying, have a perspective and step away from your ego a little bit and just kind of have a better perspective on everything. And the nature of this reality is that, unfortunately, we live in a reality that's super dense right now, and there's suffering no matter what. And whether that be a rodent or a cow, there is going to be a deal of suffering when we take a step away from the actual source of where we're getting food. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, the more intact you can be with actually being involved with where your food's coming from, in regards to growing your own food, raising your own livestock, going out. Like I love to fish, and on the river here, and there's nothing better, even though I've been kind of struggling a bit with the concept of catching fish and eating it. But catching my own trout and then cleaning and cooking it within that same hour is a pretty amazing way to have a protein source versus going to the store and buying it.
Have you ever heard the screams of trout?
Only in my nightmares. Only in my nightmares from all the trout I've caught. But no, I've been actually struggling with the concept of catch and release, because, and this is actually it's kind of cool in the whole fly fishing and angling scene that's going on right now. There's a lot of really cool topics and debate about catch and release versus fishing strictly for substance, for eating, versus sport. Then of course you've got the whole issue with the mass fishing out in the oceans and overfishing the oceans and all that. And that's a whole other podcast. But yeah, I've been struggling a bit because I'm a steelhead angler and sportsman in regards to steelhead fishing on this river. And I am addicted to it and love it because it's just such a challenge. And I'm a very conscious angler. I obviously debarred my hooks and catch and release and all that. So one way I've kind of justified it now is I always bring a trash bag with me, and I'm always cleaning up trash around the river, and I'm paying into certain foundations like the Smith River Alliance here that works with anglers to protect the river from mining operations and other things like that. So there is some conservation included with that, but I still struggle on the daily when it's steelhead season on, like, is this something I should be doing or not? Because in the end, I'm catching and torturing in a way these fish, or am I? Is it a sport? Maybe this is making the fish more robust in regards to their flight or their ability to survive, and I'm making them hardier in that way, or not. I don't know. It's a topic that I've had really amazing discussions with up here about, but it kind of does tie back into the idea of our relationship to animals and what that relationship really is, as we are the pure consciousness on this plane that has really brought this reality to fruition. So what is our role in connection with animals, and how far can we take that in regards to using them for our own benefit?
And fishing is fun. It's very meditative. You're in nature. And I grew up in a family of fishermen, trout fishermen. We'd be in the mountains and fish with regularity. And just that exposure to the outside. My parents were avid outdoors people and environmentalists before it was called environmentalism. But just in myself growing up in that house, it instilled in me and my brothers a deep appreciation for nature. And you're absolutely right. When you catch a fish yourself, it's a whole different energetic experience as opposed to going to Whole Foods and buying farm-raised salmon from Norway or something,
Yeah, gross.
So, yeah, it's a whole different thing. Let me finish a thought I think I was about to make there. A lot of the paleo carnivores that I talk about and hopefully this will lead in more into the energetic things that you're talking about. A lot of them had a similar story in that they were once vegetarians, and then when they started eating meat again, they felt like they're thriving more physically.
Yeah.
And that's because they jumped in with both feet to an ideology and didn't go through that proper transition phase. So they didn't do that well. And so just like the fighting monks in hills of China, would have their fish farm, where they considered fish more of a tonifying food. People now on the paleo are having a similar experience. However, in my business, I talk to people that have been on paleo for an extended time now, carnivore paleo, and a lot of their old problems are starting to reappear because they've gone off the deep end on the other extreme, rather than finding a balance or simply assessing what their needs are that change day to day, season to season, phase of life. All those require different measures. And so let's look at meat eating, and let's just say we're even, getting good, wild game or what have you. It does have those tonifying qualities, which can, again, be a tonic, but on another level, you're setting a ceiling, because the energetic qualities of meat, of any kind of flesh food, and let's talk about what most people get, whether it's in Whole Foods or a regular supermarket, it's the same thing. There's a lot of qualities in flesh that you really don't want in your body all the time. And flesh has within it a lot of adrenal hormones that are coursing through that animal's body at the time of slaughter. Now, first off, even when the big axe hits them, they're leading a life. And if you don't think animals don't appreciate that they're getting farmed by us for food, they aren't caught up in an intellectual process. They know what's going on. So even, grass fed and all that kind of stuff, they know someday that day is coming. And so it's different than wild game, but animals have a different frequency altogether anyway. So when you eat an animal's body, you're not only getting the animal bandwidth incorporated into your energy field, but you're also getting those adrenal end products that are fight or flight, fear. And, most of us are just trying to deal with our own fear. So why do you want a body that's, the flesh is full of that stuff that was present right at the time, it got the big one.
Well, that's why hunting is kind of unique in that if you're a good hunter, you and sometimes, yes, the prey, the deer or whatever will know it's being hunted and it'll kick up its adrenaline and start to taint the meat a bit. But a good hunter knows how to, in a way, minimize that so that you're not getting as much of that, those energetics. Plus, it's also a free animal that hasn't been living in under the fear of being in captivity the whole time. So that's why I think hunting is really, is the way to go in regards to minimizing a lot of those toxins and stuff in the meat.
Yeah, and we have a lot of lions here where we live, and we have a tremendous deer and elk population. And, there's a natural balance. The lions pick off deer, and that's just kind of the way it is. And everybody kind of gives it its all. And animals, of course, being on a different bandwidth, they do not have the possibility of raising their consciousness like humans. That's not their purpose for being here in the first place. So not to minimize the fact that they are sentient beings and should be respected, but within the natural order, they do play a role. And it's really not inhumane if you're in a situation like, people in different historical points used to be, where they relied on that as a food source. And of course, when you you are the one that makes the kill, you take responsibility for it. You tend to use every part of the animal without waste, and it is a whole different experience.
Yeah.
And Native Americans and other cultures, of course, they respected greatly that life for giving its all. Now, on the other hand, if you don't need to do that, and you don't need to bring that frequency into your body, but maybe you're in a transitional point where maybe you'd like to raise your frequency a little bit. I'm using words like raising frequency kind of loosely, because when you get into the physics of it, those words really aren't true. But just for some of you people out there that might be a little more educated, I just want to let them know that I'm not new agey speaking.
Yeah.
So, but if you want to go to that next level of consciousness, then exclusive meat eating, or just with regularity, is going to lower the ceiling on your ability to expand your perception. And so you might get a temporary boost, just like an athlete that takes steroids, and you're just kind of burning things up and saying, wow, I'm doing great here. But there's a price to be paid on the back end. And, you won't be able to raise your consciousness past a certain point, and that's just fact, if you are, eating flesh. So if you are eating flesh, it doesn't mean you're bad, or you're going to go to hell, or that maybe, it's not the perfect thing for you to eat right now. It might be for your health, but understand that we are a species in evolution, constantly. Expansion. Evolution connotes kind of a linear progression, and so that's why it's really not a good word. We're expansion, because all dimensions expand simultaneously. So we also want to get out of linear thought patterns, but that's just another subject.
Yeah.
So just appreciate that there's more experience here than just having a six pack and doing the physicality thing, because in the long run, if you can lighten your load and make your body more expansive, your health and your longevity will actually improve at the same time in ways that you will not be able to experience just on the physical level if you're eating meat. But you have to do it at your timing. And if you find yourself pulling into Taco Bell or just loading up the shopping cart at the butcher department or whatever, again, no problem with that. I don't have a judgment in the world about that. And I know there's a lot of people, which gets into the heated debates going on out there, that are more ideologically based. Ideology is important. You have to respect that. But you also have to respect where you're at first. So if you do find yourself in one of those camps, then just start to, not go into self-judgment, but a little bit of introspection and say, well, maybe that's saying something about my food choices, or saying something about me. Why do I require that kind of density? Why do I have that kind of attachment for, whether it's just kind of junk or denser foods in the first place? And maybe a good opportunity would be to not try to change, but just dip your toes in the water and maybe have one meal a week where it's a little bit lighter, or you use healthier ingredients, and kind of get your experience. And after a while, you might actually like it, and you might start understanding things from a different perspective. And that's how the journey begins. That's what I did. I went from body conscious athlete, overly muscled up and everything, to and through all the phases in between. So and it's a journey of self-discovery. But I'll finalize by saying this: it's not about the food. And in my own experience, I've realized for a long time, that the food will add qualitative aspects to your experience, but it won't make you who you are. And in fact, your desire to experiment with other things, just to be open to other ideas, not being so rigid in one camp or the other, will get you to where you think you're trying to get to a lot sooner than having any rigid belief systems. And rigid belief systems, by the way, or a severe judgment about a certain person. You could be judging a vegan and call them soy boys and all that kind of stuff. Or you could, on the other side, be, a severe judgment about the carnivores, and, those judgments against your fellow people and that kind of rigidity is going to create more aging, toxicity, inflammation, and wreak havoc in your body way more than if you're eating the food that they're eating, the people you're judging. And I will say, if I could somehow free my consciousness from any form of judgment whatsoever, and choose between, okay, that free state or else having a less than impeccable diet, I'll take that level of consciousness any day of the week over being obsessed over what I'm eating, because I know that has a more dramatic effect, not only on my physical health, but on my spiritual evolution. But the fact is if you're free of those kinds of judgments, then you're going to be eating pretty light anay, just because.
I was going to say they go hand in hand. The person that's eating Taco Bell every day is not going to, typically not somebody who's super enlightened, because with that enlightenment, which would entail not, the Zen Buddhist idea, who are really good at explaining like no lack of judgment, how important it is to not judge. You're going to just not resonate with that experience of going to Taco Bell. I will admit, I've had my fair share of Taco Bell drive-ins, and my kids love that stuff. And it's like a special treat every now and then after baseball, when unfortunately in the little town that's seaside to us is not that enlightened as of yet. We're working on that. So there's not a lot of food options. And when you live in the country, sometimes you have to make a little sacrifice there and there. But it's very rare that we do that. And occasionally when I do find myself sitting in that line, getting that stuff, man, after I eat it, you just feel horrendous. And it's like, why did I do that to myself? And it's very rare that we do that these days. But if somebody who's eating Taco Bell every day or McDonald's or that's Frankenfood stuff, I would love to find, it would be interesting to see if somebody, there's the guy who did the Super Size Me documentary and showed just how harmful that stuff is. But if there was like some like super elevated monk guy who decided to just eat McDonald's every day and defy natural law through his own superior consciousness, it's kind of a funny idea. But yeah, you're right. It's the judgment and the mental plane that people are on often, especially I see it a lot with the vegans, that like these diehard vegans that will look at somebody's and like say, ew, you're eating meat, like you're disgusting, and just judge them. It's just kind of laughable. That's like they're living in their own miserable kind of dogmatic viewpoint and wonder just kind of how healthy they are. Also, the other point, another analogy about people who just want to jump into pure veganism. Someone it's kind of like a good analogy would be like somebody who's overweight, maybe has never done athletics, just trying to jump into like going full board into cross training or something. They're probably going to get hurt. So a lot of times people that jump right into veganism are hurting themselves because they're not doing the right process to help their own energetic body make that conversion. And then what happens is they say, oh, veganism doesn't work for me. I'm going to go pure carnivore because that's what makes me feel good. That's what I find is the answer. So they go the other extreme, and as you said, then end up having the same issues. So it's this extreme nature of society right now where it's like, this way's the best, instead of having that connection, that more connection to our emotional self, and really knowing how to read our true conscious self in a way that takes time and effort, takes things like meditation, doing yoga, getting more in tune with yourself to understand truly what you need to feed your body.
Exactly. No, that's a good analogy with the training. It's the exact same thing. You're developing your body from the inside out. So I've seen a lot of diets come and go, jumped into all of them, especially in the early days when I made the transition from conventional medicine into naturopathy and all the things that I've done for a long time now. There's so many that have come and gone and then recycled again. I laugh because some of them in present day that are big fads, it's like, well, that was big about 30 years ago, kind of goes underground, and then somebody gets a big idea. Usually it's about marketing and that kind of stuff too. But diet is not, there's no such thing as a diet. There's only, the most brilliant system I've ever seen is we used to send some people to a clinic in France, and we kind of worked back and forth. And they even put out a book. It was called The Instinctual Diet. And I'd say if there's any one diet book that was maybe more true than any of them, it was this one. And here's the way, it was raw food based, by the way. But they weren't vegan or carnivore. And when at this clinic, and they would take care of a lot of people with, all these kinds of severe illnesses, because in my practice, that's what showed up at my doorstep. And I never wanted that, by the way. I always wanted to be a sports doc, and just work with athletes. And I got to do a little bit of that, but instead I ended up just seeing people with cancer and all that kind of thing. It is good because I learned a lot, but not at all what I wanted to do. And I still get a lot of that, people calling. But anyway, we'd work back and forth with some of these European clinics. They were one of them. And so you'd go there and there'd be a big smorgasbord of all sorts of food out on a table. And so at mealtime or whenever you wanted to eat, it was always available. Things were in dishes, whether it was meat or eggs or plant-based things. And they were all uncooked. And what people did after an extended stay in there is they developed their sensibilities to what their body really needed. And they were taught to do exactly what animals do in the wild. So if you thought you might want eggs or something, you smelled the eggs in their raw form, and if they smelled good, you ate them. And they would cook some food, by the way. The testing was done in a raw state, and they did try to encourage raw foodism as well because of the abundance of enzymes and things. And that's another idea I want to develop too. But after a while, just by smelling your food before you cook it, or if you're eating it raw, either way, it doesn't matter. That should be your main criteria to whether your body wants that or not. And it will never, ever fail you. And even if you have an idea that, I feel like this, and you're imagining it in its cooked form, if you smell it in its raw form and it doesn't smell good, or appetizing, you shouldn't eat it. It's that simple. It's a hard one. Yeah. And it really, really works.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And going back to just the natural way of things and how animals work, like if you give your dog something, typically he or she will smell it first real quickly. Typically a dog isn't the best example because they'll eat anything, but usually they will smell it. My dog is very
Oh, yeah. She always sniffs first.
That does real quick. And this will tie into the enzyme thing too. Because there's some like really fascinating stuff, even on like Netflix and stuff, that talks about cooking and like what really set man apart. And this is in their very limited scope of the show, about how we cook, and everything else on this planet obviously doesn't cook their food. Um, so the nature of cooking and how it relates to us for thousands of years in our evolution, according to like the mainstream theories and stuff, of course, is really interesting. And what's your take on cooking versus raw? And what's the value of cooking and how that relates to enzymes? So, for example, I really enjoy kale, and I grow lots of different types of kale in our garden here, and I usually put it in my smoothie every day. I like to char kale actually, and put it on my eggs. I do it raw, and I also cook it. And there's certain different types of kale that I guess are better raw, and others that have the plant has a natural protective enzyme on certain other varieties that you ideally want to cook, from what I've learned, versus eating purely raw, because that can be kind of more damaging to you. So it seems like there is some value to cooking depending on what you're cooking. What's your kind of takeaway on the cooking versus raw debate?
It's the same thing versus meat versus vegan, because what is your body adapted to doing? And when people go into raw food too quickly, they don't always have the enzyme systems. Their digestive juices haven't been supported to the point and balanced so that they can break down that plant matter in a raw state, or any kind of matter, flesh, or, because a lot of people eat raw meat products as well. You have to have the digestive capability of that. And most often, especially in our culture, everywhere on the planet now, basically, people have destroyed their digestive system. That could be a whole bunch of shows that we could do just about our digestive health. And there's a way to take the heat off your digestive system and then take other measures to build your digestive strength back to what it should be. And then you can handle more raw. So in the meantime, a transitional approach is best, where you have a certain amount of cooked food. Now, cooked food would be like meat. Not saying meat is the only cooked food, but it would be in a category of being a tonic. So when you cook it, it breaks it down. It makes it a little bit easier to digest for most people that are used to that, and can have more of a tonifying effect versus raw. And so if you're going to go exclusively raw without transitioning into it, you're probably going to have problems. And then what I see with people too is you're going to get cravings, and your cravings will build up to the point where you'll probably end up binging after a while on something. That's where you walk by the refrigerator at night and it shudders, just at your approach. So, you really should be eating what you crave, but then taking measures to educate your palate, develop your digestive system, and ease into things gradually. Okay, we lost Mike here. Let's wait for him to come back. I'll take a sip here.
Yeah. That's fascinating how it really is all on an independent personal level. There's no like one solution fits all thing to a diet, which in modern society is always looking for, of course, to sell, for sales, and the Mediterranean diet, and which actually is one that we recommend a lot as far as.
Now that is a true diet.
I'm sorry?
That is a true diet. As an Italian, that is a superior diet that everybody should be on. Actually, I love the Mediterranean diet. It's kind of in my blood. It's in my genes. It's what I grew up with. And, I grew up in a very Italian culture, 3/4 Italian, and then the other quarter, I'm not Italian, came from south of the border from Peru. So they had a very similar way of authentic, kind of south of the border cuisine. And, they did eat animal products, but unlike our culture, the animal products were almost like a condiment. And things were a lot lighter, you know, whether it's seafood or some kind of meat, just little small amounts. And, you know, meat wasn't like the main course.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it was a healthy way. And then going into more of a plant-based Mediterranean diet without the, you know, the other stuff is actually what I prefer to this day. You know, one more thing, Mike, about raw food. If you get into Chinese medicine, you understand about balance, and that means balancing the elements. You don't want to have things running too hot, too cold, too damp, or too dry. And if you get somebody that's has a damp quality, and you know, a lot of these sound foreign to people that don't understand the terminologies because we're used to Western medicine, but we can actually convert that to Western style terminology and explain what too much dampness is, and, you know, spleen deficiency and that sort of thing, so that it would actually satisfy the Western medic and just seem logical. But if you, for instance, have spleen deficiency, you're overly damp and so forth, and you try to eat a raw food diet, you're going to go down the tubes real quick. And I've seen that a lot in practice. And also, if you live in a climate where it gets a little colder or damp in the winter, and you don't adjust your diet to accommodate that, then you're going to have problems too. So you should always be changing it up to, you know, nurture your body for what it needs, but you're never going to hear what your body needs if you're reading books or, you know, listening to all the crap out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. You need to tune into yourself. And a lot of times when you're listening to the experts, you're failing to listen to the real expert. In fact, the only expert in your universe, which is you, but you never developed that knack. And food should be a tool to develop that knack.
Fascinating. Yeah, I think that's a great way to kind of leave it off today. I think this is going to be a discussion we continue, and it's a fun one, and because it affects really everybody, no matter what your interest in life. People eat, unless you're a breatharian, which is more power to you, and that's a whole other topic. But yeah, exactly. Just kind of dipping into the chat here, we've had definitely, it's cool to see DLive's growing. We're getting more and more people on board. It's funny, actually, there's a cat that I know from Cent who jumped on. He's in crypto, and he's actually from Marin, Bear. And his dad...
Marin County rules.
Yeah, exactly. His dad moved there in the 60s. I'm wondering if you know him. And
where's he live in Marin?
He was in a band called the Youngbloods. Sound familiar?
The Youngbloods? Oh,
yeah.
They were kind of a hot band, weren't they?
Yeah, they had a couple hits. And I was just curious if they might know your other buddy too, from Montecito, who was in the band. I'm blanking out on his name right now. Who was in a...
Oh, well, he's one of the old British rockers.
Yeah, but they were all kind of hanging out around that same time together.
Yeah. Well, now Marin County, you know, I grew up there. I was a kid, in the 50s, and then my formative years were, you know, high school in the early and mid 60s, and then college, the latter part of the 60s, and the whole San Francisco scene happened. And then everybody discovered Marin. Marin, back when I was a kid, was very rural. In fact, in Mill Valley, you had dairy farms, and it was like, one lane on each side of 101 going up to the bridge. And so everybody discovered Marin County with the San Francisco invasion, but it brought, just great tunes with it and everything. And I remember I was just up at Tahoe one time, and when, me and a buddy, I think we're in, I don't know, 8th grade or something, and we heard some music coming out of a bowling alley. We go in there, and his Big Brother and the Holding Company with Janis Joplin. And
wow.
Our high school dances, we used to have, one of our classmates was in Quicksilver Messenger Service. I had some friends, good friends, that were in a local band called Sons of Champlin. And, this one guy who I used to live next door to in Lagunitas, who was, that's a little rural enclave out towards West Marin.
Lagunitas beer.
Yeah. And then I was in a little band. I was the least talented in the band. I was more back then into chasing skirts and playing sports. But, I learned 3 chords on my guitar, so they put up with me for a while. And we had a band who had a very famous drummer who went on, Terry Bozzio, who became the drummer for Frank Zappa. And where I first learned my 3 chords was from a guy by the name of Terry Haggerty, who came from a lineage of classical guitarists and became the lead guitarist for Sons of Champlin. And Eric Clapton always remarked that he thought Terry was the best guitarist out there, bar none. And I still believe that to this day. And in fact, Sons of Champlin, they never went commercial. They always refused. They would never cut a track that was less than 4 hours, that kind of thing. And so, so they never got the real mainstream commercial success because they wouldn't sell out. But they were amazing. And Eric Clapton, that was his favorite band. So we grew up with all these bands. And then a lot of the big ones, like High School Dance, we had the Gollywogs, who became Creedence Clearwater. And I could go on and on. Just it was a great time for music. And so that was my experience in Marin County growing up. It was really a great time, where we'd go down to Fairfax, where I was born and raised. And it's just kind of a little sleepy little town in the redwoods there. And then all of a sudden, some of the old shops became black light shops and all that. And so we got the full onslaught of the 60s. And
that's funny. Eason saying he grew up in West Marin, but his dad is friends with Terry, and he knows him too. Small world.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I think Terry's still, I haven't been down there in so long. I've totally lost touch, but I think he's still soloing out there somewhere. I hope he is.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, it's I grew up in Orange County in the 90s, so say what you will about California and how ridiculous it is. It's pretty cool to grow up in a cultural significant place. So for me, growing up in the 90s, I was in the heart of like the ska punk boom, and would be hanging out at Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm with bands like Save Ferris and Real Big Fish and Aquabats, and a lot of the younger people my age, later millennials, and people in their early 40s knew all these bands. No Doubt, of course, would hang out with all these guys. So I kind of had a similar experience where I had friends in bands playing trumpet, though, and playing trombone in ska bands, and going to see them at the Whiskey. And it was a really cool time. And to see, hanging out with Bradley Nowell for a second, who was, of course, Sublime, and seeing Blink playing at a bands. Yeah, and seeing like the Blink guys playing at a high school party before anyone knew who they were. And now, of course, we know where that's gone with what's his name being in the UFO scene and everything. It's just bizarre. Yeah, it's cool growing up in a culturally significant place like that. Those are memories that I highly value. So,
yeah. And when I was first made the transition into private practice, when I was more holistic health, if you want to call it that, I saw a lot of those guys over the years. We used to see the Grateful Dead and all sorts of bands, and a lot of people. I don't want to drop a lot of names, but there a lot of real big names. Became close friends and everything. And it was a good time. It was a good time back there.
That's amazing. Well, cool. I think we can wrap it up for today. I know, man, it's just such a huge topic to get into in regards to diet and stuff. And I feel like we're just kind of scratched the surface. But I mean, we could literally talk for 7 to 10 hours on this topic, because it really connects everything that we're all about, from the real science of the waveform mechanics to how our bodies actually work, to the energetics behind reality in life forms, whether that be plant matter or animals. It gets into the philosophies that we're all about. It taps into Eastern medicine. It taps into New German medicine. It taps into so many things. It's really actually a fantastic launching pad for what Alfa Vedic's all about. And a lot of goes into like, what our products, why we have the products that we have. There was a cat in here asking about, just how to lose weight and stuff. And it's like, well, that's a loaded question. There's so much we would need to know about you. But one thing that I love, and I always like to give a couple little just techniques and little tips. One thing that I've really found that I love every morning is, besides having like my my fresh squeezed lemon water and the river water here that I drink, that's full of vitality and energy. And of course our 0 point liquids that I put in there, which is an amazing product that we have that with the transitional elements, which we've discussed, which is a whole other topic. But the thermogenics I really love, and thermogenics this is something we can end with. The idea of thermogenics, which is something that monks have been doing for thousands of years, and which has been made super popular with things like bulletproof coffee now, is the idea of blending fats, natural organic fats, with caffeine to provide a fire element in your system to allow for you to essentially burn calories in a way that is kind of taking on those reserves you have, so that it's the proper caloric, I guess, intake that you're getting just off, the coffee or tea with the natural lipids you're getting, the fats you're getting. For me, has been a really valuable thing that I've been doing every morning. It allows me, with my current lifestyle, to have the energy I need without the crash, and really kind of super beneficial, and a way to lose weight. So that's a little technique that I would like to drop in here. And we do have a whole thermogenic line on alfavedic.com with teas and a coffee. And we actually include tonifying herbs and stuff with our teas and coffee to even be more beneficial than just like the pure coffee, for instance.
Yeah, it is a great technology, and that's why we developed a whole tea line. And beyond the bulletproof, the bulletproof guy, all the credit to him. He's a good marketer and has his little story about trekking in Himalayas and finding this secret well. I learned that in the 70s when I was studying Chinese medicine, so it's never been a secret, but he popularized it and capitalized. That's all good. But in Tibet, the original formula wasn't with coffee. It was with a type of tea that they grow up there that has caffeine. So that's why in our line, we don't restrict it to coffee. We do have a good coffee one that has chaga mushroom and he xia wu. And, but then we have others that are, the other extreme in the thermogenic line that's a lot lighter in frequency is the floral one, which is green tea with a nice, floral overtones, but it has a little bit of caffeine. And when you mix it with coconut oil or butter, it just tastes delicious. Maybe pop it with just a hair sweetener. We've got Earl Grey, which is a little bit more of a robust tea. We've got the guayusa, which is a preferred form of mate mixed with our Jiao Gulan herb. The Earl Grey has the Godu Cola. And then mate is a favorite of a lot of people, and that has ashwagandha and reishi mushroom in it. So our thermos, which are different about them, is we give you a choice of different tastes through different caffeine sources, but then we also add the different herbs in every single one of them and made them and with suggestions, right on the package, how to make them really delicious. The good thing about thermos too is with the caffeine, when you mix it with the fat, it doesn't give you that up and down caffeine kind of rush. It maintains a nice steady energy over a long period of time, so you don't have the crash. It also helps you maintain blood sugars, and it's a good way to go too, because first thing in the morning, you really don't need to eat. And I know we're all taught that first meal of the day is more important. Well, what's more important is giving your digestive system a rest, so you just don't have food in it all the time. Now, if you're a farmhand and you're working your ass off outside, yeah, by all means, sit down and have a good breakfast because you're going to burn it up. But most people these days, come from the keyboard warrior, strata of society. So when your digestive system is needlessly working, give it a break. Elevate your blood pressures, your sugars, your energy levels, and everything. With the thermogenic, you can call it intermittent fasting. There's all sorts of ways to do it. And one last thing I'll throw in with the gentleman that's talking about weight loss. Again, sure, anybody can overeat, but why? And we won't go into it now because it's another huge discussion. But in reality, people that are carrying a little more weight than they want to, all the way to the extreme of being obese, it's mirroring on the emotional level a need to insulate. And we could talk about how in the physical that acts out with sodium and water molecules and creates what we call adipose. But it's a need to insulate against the electrical resistance that is really creating stress on many levels of their being. And so if you get to the heart of that level of stress and relieve a little pressure, you'll probably find that you'll start losing weight, and maybe without any severe diets at the same time, and it'll stay off rather than going into caloric restriction as the end all. Mike, I'll hand it over to you to finish up here.
Well, a couple things. One thing I always appreciate too when I wake up is, first and foremost, I have a big glass of water. I always, you're kind of dehydrated, right? So that's something I find super important. And I squeeze a fresh organic lemon that I hopefully have grown if I have enough. And then I throw some of our 0 point in there and stuff. And that usually is pretty good for me. A couple big glasses of water.
Dehydration's from the pint of tequila you had before bed.
That too. Yeah, for sure. I'm more of a whiskey guy. But
just kidding. Mike doesn't do that.
No, actually, I don't drink alcohol anymore. That's been a big thing for me. I've completely cut alcohol out of my life, which is nuts. I mean, besides the kombucha I drink, which is like 0.5%, I don't even drink the alcoholic kombucha anymore. And I go out and I still go to parties and I do fun social things. I mean, I've been a DJ for 20 years. And I'm really embracing the no alcohol thing more because I didn't like how it made me feel after, the next day than anything. I have nothing. I had any issues with alcohol. I actually had a very good relationship with alcohol. But anyways, that's a whole other story. One thing, and this is a loaded question too, but I did want to approach this because we have another person in the chat who is saying it sounds like they're dealing with maybe some cancer and they're looking for an anti-cancer diet. And they said, yeah, I know that's a loaded question, but that is just something we could sum up, and then maybe we could have a whole nother discussion about that. But really, there's no such thing, right?
Well, there is such a thing if you're on an uncomfortable plateau where a growth in your body won't go away or is starting to eat up your resources and emaciating you and that kind of thing. But what we'll address at another time is the fact that what we think of as cancer is a natural biological program in the body. And we could explain in great detail how that program is healing things on both the emotional and the physical plane. Now, I think last week or in the past, I mentioned that when I was doing a class one time and we were doing autopsies, a old professor, kind of my age back then, who came from a different era of experience and training, because conventional medical training has changed radically over the years, where they've got increasingly mechanistic and less doctorish. So anyway, when, we said, well, where do these little scars in the body cavities? He said they're tumor scars, because tumors just kind of come and go for some reason. And then sometimes when they don't go, the body, unless it's in the way of something, doesn't have a problem. It just stops the growth and people die with them, not because of them. Now, because our bodies are inundated with a lot more things these days, not the least is the fact that we're taught to be afraid, very afraid, we stymie the natural 2-cycle process where that growth would do its job. And again, that takes a lot of explanation to make people appreciate that it's actually true, because they're saying, what the hell? Hey, my own mom died from cancer. So, when I first started hearing some of these things within New German medicine, it seemed far-fetched to me too. But now I know for a fact it is true. And also because when, in my clinical experience, when I've seen literally hundreds and hundreds of people go full circle, just because we understand the process and help guide them through it and make sure, do the terrain testing that assures that they have all the resources that are devoid in most people these days because of other factors that are bombarding us on the planet. And then also appreciating that the whole thing is an event in the psyche as well. And that medical diagnosis actually shoots us in the foot, on day one. So all these things are great impediments to what the body is trying to do. And then it gets stuck in these phases where things just keep growing, where that wasn't the intention of the biological program in the first place. So yeah, people that have the conventional belief system of cancer as a disease, when their bodies, even relatively healthy bodies these days, do not have the internal resources because they're all being eaten up by our body just trying to deal with Wi-Fi, chemtrailing, GMOs, trying to make a buck working 80 weeks when it used to only take 30 hours a week. I mean, it's just crazy the kind of stress we're under. So when you, again, can work with the process, make sure the body has everything it needs, then it will go full circle, symptoms go away. And then on the back end, some other marvelous things happen, which were why this whole thing, was triggered through your neurology in the first place. So cancer diet, first off, in a cancer diet is to understand you are not a victim of a disease, and not at all trying to minimize the pain, suffering, and anguish that people go through when they get that diagnosis. My mom was diagnosed at 9, and I watched her go through she was just that's like this fiery, half Peruvian, half Italian lady that, you didn't mess with her. And from age 9 to age 13, when she finally made the passage, I saw her just become a shadow of her former self.
Oh, you mean when you were 9?
Yeah, when I was 9. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, she was 42 when she finally passed.
Oh,
but
geez, that's super young.
Yeah. So, I just watched her diminish and grew up with the belief system that a deadly disease got her. So, hey, I appreciate, my heart goes out to people that are dealing with it, the families who are dealing with it. Please don't get me wrong, I'm not minimizing, but I know more now, and through the heroic actions of other patients I've had by the hundreds over the years that have went out and decided to just do something different and change their mind and actually taken different steps. And, actually they did that because the other system gave up on them and said, you're toast. So just, there's nothing more we can do with you. And that's usually when, they'd seek out me. And, but, they were heroic in that they dared to do something different than just give up. And way more often than not, extremely high percentage of people got better. They didn't go into remission, they got better. And at the end of it, they said, well, no way I'd ever want to go through that again. It was horrendous. It was a real nail biter, but I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world because I'm so much more aware and healthier. I understand now why it happened in the first place. And it was probably the single most important event of my life to launch me onto the next phase of understanding what my real purpose on this planet is. So, not trying to suggest make lemonade out of lemons, but it's kind of something like that.
Yeah. And so to kind of sum it up, and this is a whole other talk, we could do an entire 3-hour thing on this question on best diet for those currently battling with, a tumor or something. is just a couple tidbits. I mean, what would you say as far as somebody who's currently going through this in a more generic way? Not that that is really something we can offer, but I mean, it sounds like, I know traditionally people say, you know, eating kind of like, I call it the old Asian man diet, seems to do well, where it's minimal and, you know, blue green algae and stuff like that, where I mean, do you have anything to say to that?
No, it's definitely time to lighten the load. You don't want to go on a pure beefalo diet for sure. You know, plant-based, that sort of thing. Here's the tricky part though. You know, we used to work with the Gerstein Clinic down there because they were doing some good things. And people don't know what the Gerstein Clinic is, a German doctor who started a clinic and then run by his daughter for many years down in Mexico. And what they would do when you go down, there's a whole lot more to it than just diet, but the foundation was a lot of juicing and fasting, but tremendous amount of juicing to give you the enzymes from, you know, juice, you know, the concentrates, the enzymes from plant matter. And it would work brilliantly, but it didn't work all the time. And, but they still had a great batting average compared to, I mean, no comparison compared to conventional medicine, and they really helped a lot of people to heal themselves. But the cases that it didn't work were because they didn't understand the process of cancer, and then it's biphasic. In other words, it goes through one phase and then a second phase. So if you're in the first phase, the Gerstein Clinic is unbelievable for helping people, you know, reactivate the enzyme systems, bring back their pancreatic juices and all the other things that it was designed to do. Work brilliantly. However, in the second phase, what happens is your body is getting ready to digest the tumor. And now when a cancer mechanism is activated, organisms that already live in you go through a cyclogenic morphological changes, and they activate certain seeds of certain organisms, you know, either fungal or bacteria, to go through a certain change. Then they migrate from day one to the scene that the body's trying to clean up or activate to do other things that are too lengthy to get into here. And then when the second phase is activated, where the body says, hey, job done, we don't need to grow anything anymore, then those little creatures will secrete enzymes that digest the tumor. So if you're on a fast and you're not getting any kind of protein, those creatures need some protein. That doesn't mean that you need to eat a lot of meat or anything. There's a lot of good, clean ways to get protein. But you want to make sure you have some protein. Otherwise, they won't be able to manufacture the enzymes, and you might have the tumor not be able to get dissolved. So there's a lot to know about it. Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's wonderful. I think that's a whole other discussion we can have. And I think a lot of folks would love to be a part of that. So we'll schedule it out in the upcoming weeks. I think that's a good way to kind of end it today. If you're new to Alfa Vedic, thanks for joining us today. Please subscribe to our channel on DLive. We also replay this on YouTube at 4 o'clock today, Pacific Standard Time. Please also join our Telegram channel, t.me/Alfa Vedic. That's ALFAVEDIC. That is a community we're trying to develop for more direct interaction with us. So those are kind of the two things: is DLive, Telegram. Also, we're on a new platform called Scent that we're really enjoying. We're trying to get off the prescribed internet ghettos of Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google, because those really are derived by the centralized control groups that have been funneling us according to their their needs. And we are really trying to support alternative solutions to that are more decentralized, which is where the future is going, in order for us to really get out of these dark ages, which we're in currently. So on a more positive note, the Telegram channel is great. We're trying to develop that. And please join at t.me/Alfa Vedic, DLive, and join us on Scent. Those are the 3 platforms we're really pushing right now. So please subscribe to us. Also, go to our website, alfavedic.com, and join the mailing list there, because we send out wonderful newsletters that have all sorts of cool information and updates on what we're doing at the Alfa Vedic Gardens, upcoming events we have going on, as well as we do offer special discounts to just those in the group there. We are moving forward to start and launch the Physic Garden Co-op, which would be a whole new way that our company is going to be structured. And moving into this co-op will be a fantastic way to get more involved with Alfa Vedic. We'll have private discussion groups, Zoom web conferences, and meetups, physical in-person meetups. We are working on having a corporate national headquarters up here where people can come visit us, where we'll have our main kind of location in our retail space. We're also been heavily involved with our local farmers markets, which has been wonderful, getting out into the community. We've developed our own farmers artisan market here in our little town that we're doing on Sundays. So if you are up in the Redwoods by Jedediah Smith State Park up here on the Smith River, please come visit us on Sundays. That's from 11 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon in a small town called Gasky, here where I live personally. So we're heavily more and more involved in our community, which is everything. Once again, something I'm always pushing is think global, but act local, and get involved in your own locality. Become more of a locavore. Be more in tune with your community around you. That is more crucial than ever in this day and age, is really being involved in your community. And yeah, anything else you'd like to end with today, Bear?
I think you said it all.
Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us today on the chat. It's been wonderful, and we look forward to seeing you next week, same time, same bat channel. Cheers.